David, this is probably one of the areas that the American public is going to feel the most. If you have TSA agents that aren't being paid, air traffic controllers that aren't being paid, and that in turn leads to sick-outs, that's where you might feel the pain first. What have we seen so far?
So we've started to see a little bit of an impact in a couple of areas, longer wait times, more TSA agents calling in, as you said, sick, not showing up. So I think over the weekend, both Miami and Houston airports had shut down checkpoints at particular terminals.
Yeah, shut down terminals at points. Each shut down an actual terminal.
Exactly, and it could have been a little bit lighter flight activity in those days as well. But I think what you're starting to see is the natural reaction, right? If these guys aren't getting paid, these are workers that make 25, 35 grand a year. At some point, they got to go do something else.
Are the airlines thinking of doing anything?
As far as kind of funding it?
Yeah, I was wondering whether the airlines could actually end up trying to fund this on some kind of almost like loan basis and hope that somehow they could get paid back later, given the fact that there's Clear and all these other services now that are private, that are effectively privatized versions of security.
If I was an airline, I would tell you I already am paying for it. Right, all the fees and the licenses and the stuff that gets put onto each and every single ticket. So I wouldn't imagine that the airlines are going to go ahead.
Is there a lawsuit that they could pursue? I mean, if they're being taxed with these fees that come on it, and they're not getting the services they're being taxed for. Yeah,
look, that's a little bit outside of my my sort of area of discipline, but I certainly think that they can exert lobbying pressure. They can go ahead and push for those types of changes. I think the upfront stuff that you're going to see from the passenger level is going to be problematic.
Right.
It's good. Everybody's going to have that, but there's also a lot of stuff that happens in the background to keep air travel safe. The FAA itself, right? Certifying training programs, certifying new equipment, registering new aircraft,
and that's all now slowed down.
The FAA is not working right now, so they're all on furlough. So a lot of that infrastructure and support for the air travel system is now on pause, if you will.
In terms of ticket buying, though, is this a 14-day situation out? Meaning you still have another 2 weeks before you're going to start. I mean, I think there are people now who would be thinking about traveling in 2 or 3 weeks from now that have not purchased a ticket that you think they would hold off? That's the question.
Well, look, I think it's possible that you could start to see that, but if you show up an extra 20 minutes early, it's going to depend a little bit on whether you need to go, whether you have to go. Business travelers, I don't think are going to stop traveling because of the potential for longer lines. It's inconvenient, but you're going to get through it. If it's a marginal trip that you might want to take, yeah, you might think about.
I mean, we're talking about what the consumer is going to feel, the pain they'll potentially feel. The pain that the airlines might feel, is it relevant? Is it significant? Is it something that you really have to start thinking about in terms of the stock valuation?
If we start to see if we start to see that the forward buying start to slow down a little bit, absolutely.
But to this point, you would say there's no impact on the airlines?
We haven't seen. So I spoke to a couple of different airlines about this on Friday. Specifically, they have not seen anything show up in their numbers yet. Obviously, as it compounds, as it gets longer, you increase the risk of this happening. You increase the pain that you might have at the check-in line. So I think those things are happening right now. You haven't started to see it bleed into the numbers. It is a risk, I think, for the entire industry. I don't think you can call it any one airline as being more or less exposed to this.
Well, let's talk about the airline stocks just overall, what it means when we've talked so much about the potential economic slowdown. Are you seeing that show up in any of the bookings in the airline companies?
Well, so what we've seen from the airlines so far is in this first quarter period, the momentum in unit revenue has moderated a little bit. That's driven the stocks into another little bit of a short-term downdrift here.
Is that mostly international flights, or is that within the United States?
It's within the United States, but there's some context around it, right? You're in a period now where oil price declines of 3 and 4 and 5 months ago are going to start to show up into those fare numbers. If you do start to see a slowdown in bookings and things like that, that'll also sort of exacerbate that. So I think you do have this happening at a time that isn't great for the airlines. You're already seeing a little bit of moderation in unit revenue momentum.
Do you distinguish between the airlines? Is there one that's better run than the others, or is it the macro environment that's kind of moving all of these prices?
So I do distinguish between the airlines. In our sort of house view, you've got the network players that'll get you anywhere in any classes of style, the lower cost guys that'll get you to a smaller number of places at a lower fare, and then the premium value guys, the JetBlues, the Alaskas, they don't go everywhere. I would say the network operators is going to be a Delta. They've got a more diversified revenue stream. In the lower cost guys, Southwest, it's probably not one of our top picks right now just because they are extending into Hawaii at a time when it's a little bit of a weaker travel environment, but eventually they'll get that right.